start recording. So it's Feb March जिसका एक ही variant होता है and like generally with your mocks in particular like Feb March कर लिया करो because at times teachers at least for subjects like maybe a little math maybe sciences के लिए maybe MCQs के लिए Feb March से काफ़ी चीज़ें उठा लेते हैं because most kids ने Feb March किया नहीं होता या तो Feb March से उठा लेंगे या तो अक्टूबर नवंबर के मोस्ट रीसेंट पेपर लाइक सो दैट विल बी 2017 के अक्टूबर नवंबर के 3 जो वेरिएंट्स हैं उनसे उठाने की काफी कोशिश करते हैं so if you guys are just interested in scoring well in the mocks like that could work okay so let's proceed this will be our case study so concerns in Vietnam over trade with China table 1 shows the value of Vietnamese so trade in goods with selected trade partners, January to July, no one gives a damn. And if you remember, so the current account was made up of 4 components, and the first component was your net trade or your balance of trade in goods, which is basically your export revenue minus your import expenditure. Just pointing it out, I've pointed this out a lot of times. When you're talking about X minus M, it is export revenue minus import of expenditure. It's not units or anything. That would lead to a lot of issues. Anyways, so you have this table. We'll get to it later on if you need it. So Tycoon comes to the rescue as cheap Chinese goods overwhelm Vietnam's economy. Okay, this actually happens. Okay, so Vietnam is enjoying rapid growth, but its small businesses are being overwhelmed by a huge influx of cheap, mass-produced goods from China. So what's happening here is that China, for some reason, is managing to produce at a lower average cost. That could be one possibility, and it's just exporting to Vietnam, and the local industry is being overwhelmed by these saste goods. They can't price that low, so they go out of business. Now, the reason for these cheap goods could be, there could be a lot. It could either be because China is actually very efficient. It could either be because the Chinese government is providing subsidies to the export industry, which, by the way, is illegal in the real world. And the most likely option is it could either be because China has devalued its yuan, which it did do for decades, basically. So these are the 3 ways it could do so, but let's continue. These goods are undercutting the prices of domestically produced items. A Vietnamese entrepreneur has a rescue plan designed to support new business startups. He has spent some million developing his V Plus shopping mall. He is now offering new businesses rent-free 50-year leases in the mall, which is located in some whatever place this is, as long as they sell only Vietnamese-made products. So this is just basically a way to ensure that the shops don't sell Chinese products, they only sell Vietnamese-made products, and the incentive provided is that you get a spot on the mall, 50 साल के लिए rent free. He's also urging the Vietnamese government to introduce this idea nationwide to prevent the closure of tens of thousands of businesses each year and encourage customers to buy Vietnamese products. China exports to the world at very, very low prices, and that's a huge pressure on the Vietnamese economy, he explained. I'm a businessman. I understand why firms can't develop. Without this kind of support, Vietnamese businesses will perish. And okay, this is important now. China's recent devaluation of its currency, the yuan, triggered fears of China overwhelming Vietnam with even cheaper goods. Because obviously, as your exchange rate goes down, which is what China deliberately does, your export prices will go down. So the price competitiveness of your exports at least would increase. So it gets even cheaper. Just a small on the side note. They ask this mainly in MCQs, but the difference between devaluation and depreciation is such that devaluation is where the government itself artificially lowers the exchange rate. Maybe that lowering does come through manipulating demand supply by selling or buying currency in the foreign exchange market, using your reserves, but it's when the government does so. Depreciation mainly happens in a freely floating exchange rate system where the sources of demand supply organically change or decrease your exchange rate in this case. As a result, Vietnam's central bank devalued the Vietnamese currency, the dong. Okay. Are you guys still with me? Okay, okay. So we have one yes, which should be good enough. Okay, so basically हुआ क्या है China वैसे तो सस्ता था. The further devaluation of the yuan, Chinese currency, would lead to its export prices decreasing even further, making its exports even more cheap. However, note that exchange rate is measured, between two countries' currency. So what Vietnam is trying to do कि उन dong की अगर हम value कम कर दें, वो भी devaluation कर दें. So then, relative to the dong,
Bong.
yeah, जो उनकी जो currency, let's just call it the Vietnamese currency. Okay, so relative to the Vietnamese currency, China's own currency won't, be as low. The exchange rate won't be as low. Do you guys get that, or whoever is still answering? So I'll assume you guys got that. Okay.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. So despite the Vietnamese dislike, okay, of Chinese products, their prices make them unavoidable when Vietnamese businesses lack funds and household budgets are modest. There have been calls for boycotts of Chinese goods, but they have all failed miserably. An economist in the Asian Development Bank, a very nice bank, you guys don't need to know, but uh, it's funny though, because even in the Asian Development Bank, the largest amount of shares are owned by the US. So even it dictates a lot of its decision making. Okay, but back to uh, the economics paper. So an economist at the Asian Development Bank, however, said that the V plus concept, which was basically ये जो बकवास उसने की थी, हम mall wall में मुफ्ते के साथ, मुफ्ते की, we won't charge them rent and they will only sell Vietnamese products. So that's the V plus concept. Showed good intentions, but the government should only support firms with the potential to compete. Okay, so you should only support those firms that can actually develop their comparative advantage and actually compete, perhaps in the long run. There needs to be a change in the government policy, he said. It needs to move away from subsidies for all goods towards targeted subsidies for industries with the potential to compete, because obviously there's always an opportunity cost. So if you're सब पूरी दुनिया को provide, मतलब पूरी economy को provide नहीं कर रहे, if it's targeted subsidies to some industries, might help them develop their comparative advantage. And remember, subsidies are a form of protectionism because they artificially do protect your own products as they lower their costs artificially and lower their prices. Let's say what they're talking about here is actually illegal, but I don't think the economics examiner cares that much about that. When you do it yourself, so obviously thoda jaldi padna, I'll just write it. Where you should be done when your subsidy with like, in your case study with like 35 minutes. If not 35 minutes, then maximum you can go is 45 minutes. If you go beyond that, literally just leave the case study. Go to your section B. Especially for those people who haven't practiced case study. Last year बहुत लोगों ने mock में किया था. They just took an hour on their case study and with 30 minutes में वो section B करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. So the max you should go is 45 minutes, but ideal time 30-35 में खत्म कर लो, so it's a pretty good time. Okay. So part A part 1, state the country shown in table 1 that has the greatest deficit on its balance of trade in goods with Vietnam. So कौन सी country है that has the greatest deficit? Oops. Okay, so we're talking about the Vietnam's trade in goods इधर दिखाया हुआ है. So which country के साथ इसका greatest surplus होगा? If Vietnam has the greatest surplus with this particular country, it would have the greatest deficit with Vietnam, right? So you just subtract these two, and जिधर भी सबसे ज़्यादा surplus वियतनाम के पास आता है, उसी country का ज़्यादा deficit होगा.
Subtract करो.
Sorry? Is that a question or is that just a?
नहीं यार, मतलब आंसर कैसे पता चलेगा नहीं करोगे तो?
Okay, chalo, let me. It's okay. What I'm saying is, how they're asking, कौन सी country has the largest deficit in trade in goods with Vietnam. What I'm saying is वियतनाम के पास जिस कंट्री के साथ सबसे ज्यादा सरप्लस होगा, if Vietnam is enjoying a high surplus, the other country would be suffering from a high deficit, right? So you just calculate Vietnam के पास किस country के साथ सबसे ज्यादा surplus है. So you basically, and you calculate through export minus import. So इधर अगर देखो 15.9 minus 3.7, it's like 12.2. इधर तो कुछ नेगेटिव में आ रही है, तो यू कैन जस्ट इग्नोर दिस बिकॉज इधर वियतनाम अगर डेफिसिट में है तो उधर दूसरी कंट्री वुड बी इन अ सरप्लस. इधर कुछ 2 समथिंग या 1 समथिंग आएगा, इट्स नॉट दैट मच. इधर तो नेगेटिव में वैल्यू है, इधर भी कोई 1 समथिंग आ रहा है. So clearly the largest surplus Vietnam has is with the US. Ergo the US must have the largest deficit with Vietnam. Just interrupt if you have any questions or if it's not clear. Okay, so identify 3 other components of the balance of payments that will allow you to calculate the current account balance of Vietnam with that country. If you guys remember, the balance of payments ka current account jo tha, it had 4 components. Trade in
Financial account.
No, okay. So there are 3 accounts of the current account of the balance of payment. That's the current account, the capital account, and the financial account. Where a lot of economists just put the capital account and the financial account into one, in case you guys had been searching online, kabhi kabar aise likhate hai. But ये पूछ रहे current account में further 3 components बताओ. तो current account के 4 components होते थे. Trade in goods जो हमने कर लिया है, 3 उसके अलावा बताने. So your net trade in services, so net income flows and current transfers. So we just write these. You just have to identify, not explain. Right, and I'm just checking the market scheme as I go along because maybe ये पहली बार ही कर रहा हूँ. So yeah, so trade and services, or we call them invisibles, and you have income flows, or you can also call that investment income, and you can call these transfers as well. So that's it. You just need to identify 3, not explain anything, and we'll go on to part B. So, and ये देखो ये काफी छोटे questions काफी जल्दी से हो जाते हैं. Like, don't spend a lot of time on the first few questions. The 6 markers or the 8 markers are a little tricky though. So explain any 2 factors that would determine the impact of China's decision to devalue the yuan upon Vietnamese trade with China. Let's take that to. Oops, my bad. Let's take this to our whiteboard, in fact. Because the issue is, since I don't have a drawing pen, I can't actually write that much. There's only so much I can write with my, what do you call it, with my mouse. So I just try to type as much as possible. That way you guys don't suffer from my bad handwriting either. Yeah, so bol kya rahe hain ye log, they're like, explain any 2 factors. Okay, so only 2 that would determine the impact. अच्छा, the impact मतलब क्या होगा of China's decision to devalue the yuan upon Vietnamese trade with China. Okay, so the first factor definitely should link with it's the elasticity, linking to the Marshall-Lerner condition. So we'll go with that. I don't know. I'm not sure of the spelling. Marshall-Lerner ऐसी कुछ होगा. Condition. Marshall-Lerner condition क्या थी? It stated that depreciation or devaluation, excuse my spelling, only beneficial, or only, let's say, improves BOP if your PED of exports and how do you put plus sign? Okay, and PED of imports, and it's talking about both, like goods and services, is greater than 1. बोलना क्या चाह रहा है boy? He's basically saying that generally the elasticity is more towards the elastic. Your PD is more towards the elastic region, or even if it is the inelastic region, तो इतना ज़्यादा inelastic नहीं है. Like, because what values would give you above 1? Suppose इसकी your export elasticity is like suppose like 1.1, which is elastic, which is like 2, which is also elastic. So if you generally have elastic exports and imports, in those cases devaluation would improve your balance of payments. इसको इतना explain करने की जरूरत नहीं है, but just to clarify concepts, because a lot of people have been asking about this as well. If you generally look at, like devaluation, slightly detached from the question at थोड़ी देर के लिए, exchange rate कम हो रहा है, इसका effect आता है आपके exports पे, इसका effect आता है आपके imports पे. सही है. So if you look at exports, so export prices को अगर हम देखें, export prices fall because your exchange rate has fallen, तो ये सस्ते हो गए. Quantity should hence rise. I'm using quantity rather freely in a macro setting, but just to explain concepts. So quantity should rise. How it should increase. How much it increases by depends on your elasticity. So if your exports are elastic, then as your export price, even if it falls by a small amount, the quantity would rise by such a large amount that, as we used to study in micro, that total revenue was maximized. In this case, we can call total revenue to be export revenue, which is X. So export revenue is maximized. However, if it's the inelastic case, and itna is question mein nahi likha, I'm just telling you guys generally. So inelastic case mein agar export prices aapki kam ho gayi, इतना ज़्यादा फायदा नहीं होगा, because your quantity will increase by a very small amount, like it's not proportional. So your total revenue will actually decrease. You can say your export revenue decreases. So in one case it is beneficial, that is the elastic case, so devaluation is beneficial. The other case it is not. And we can do the same thing for imports as well. I'll just quickly go through how import prices, the prices should increase, because now it's more difficult to import stuff, because you have to exchange your currency and then pay, right? So it's while the price might be the same in dollars, for example, because your currency is weaker, it is more difficult for you to buy those dollars. So $10 की चीज वही $10 का ही इम्पोर्ट है आपको, लेकिन लेट्स से 1,000 रुपीज देने के अलावा आपको पता नहीं कितने ज्यादा रुपीज देने पड़ते हैं, बिकॉज योर rupee has depreciated, which is very unfortunate, because I was calculating costs above, like, so costs abroad. So either way, let's look at the elastic case and the inelastic case. In the elastic case, if your prices increase, your quantity goes down by a large amount. Ergo, your total revenue, which we can call export revenue in this case, what we can call import expenditure in this case, because if you remember what we studied in micro, total revenue was equals to total expenditure, because आप वो जितना कमाएगा आप उतना दोगे. So for your perspective, because we're talking about imports here, your import expenditure will go down, which is beneficial again, because it helps your balance of trade and hence your balance of payment. If you look at the inelastic case, if prices increase but quantity only falls by a small amount, in this case, the other country's total revenue increases, or your country's total expenditure increases, which is in this case we can call import expenditure. So generally, elastic cases where elastic is normally exists in the long run, because balance of trade is X minus N, and it makes up a significant chunk of your current account. So your balance of trade improves, and hence your current account improves. In the long run, it normally doesn't improve. Are we good with this?
Long run में तो everything becomes elastic, ना?
Sorry.
इस वाले क्वेश्चन के लिए ये सारा लिखना होगा.
नहीं. Side note. Okay, let me just repeat what I just said. I think I misquoted something. Okay, so where the elastic cases are, normally long run. So yeah, elastic में long run में generally, new substitutes come about, all of that type of stuff. We even learned in micro that a factor affecting TED was the time period. In the long run, things are normally elastic. If things are normally elastic, we see इधर के export revenue बढ़ रहा है, input expenditure कम हो रहा है, मतलब BOT should improve, which makes up a significant amount of your current account. So current account or balance of payment should improve, which means it moves towards a surplus. Like, don't make absolute statements. Like, it doesn't mean it'll go towards a surplus, but it moves towards one at least. In the short run, things are normally inelastic, which was this case where export revenue come ho raha hai, import expenditure बढ़ रहा है. So your BOT, moves towards deficit, and the same can be said for your current account and so on. Not needed in this question, not saying that, but generally this is a very a concept that's tested a lot of the time, and a taste of this was in this particular question. It's just basically formalized by what I've written here. That's the Marshall-Lerner condition, that devaluation is only beneficial if PED of exports and PED of imports, if you add them, it's greater than 1. That means exports and imports are relatively more towards the elastic side of things. So that would be your first factor, and you had just a brief line to explain this, right? Isse diagram bhi banta hai. It's not linked here, but do you guys want me to draw the J curve anyways, or are you guys?
4 mark में diagram थोड़ी आएगा.
हाँ, नहीं इधर नहीं बनता.
4 mark में diagram नहीं आएगा.
Yes, whoever's saying that, I agree with you. Lekin I'm saying, do you want me to draw the J curve anyways just to review it, or are you guys good?
Yeah, can you do that?
Okay, so let's draw it. So Marshall-Lerner से J curve बनता है. So you have this. I wish I had a drawing pen. So either you can write BOP, you can write current account, you could write BOT. The reason it doesn't make any difference because BOT is a subsection of the subset of the current account, which is a subset of the BOP. So they all move in the same direction. Here, basically, write time period. Okay, so let's take a different color. Yeah. You normally start off, and this is where your BOP or whatever is in a surplus, positive or either negative. You normally start off from the negative region. Why is that? Because normally when your BOP is in a deficit, that leads to devaluation anyways, because BOP deficit kya hai ki outflows are more than inflows. If outflows are more than inflows, then if you picture it, supply and demand ki taraf se, so your supply at least is increasing, inflows itne, your demand is decreasing in the foreign exchange market, your exchange rate value would go down. So you start off from here. So we're saying initially it in fact worsens the balance of payment, and then it starts to improve and goes up. So this turning point where it stops moving towards the deficit and starts moving towards the surplus, understand, although in this particular region it's still in a deficit, but it's at least moving towards the surplus. So we can call this to be the short run, where the Marshall-Lerner where let's say your Marshall-Lerner condition wasn't really met, because short run when things are more inelastic, so the sum of PD of exports and imports might not be greater than 1. But as soon as you move towards the long run area, where your exports and imports are more more likely to be elastic, your BOP starts to improve. Okay, so we kind of deviated from the question a lot, but I hope it clarified a few concepts. So anyhow, back to the question, जो मुझे याद भी नहीं क्या था. 2 factors बताए थे that would determine the impact of China's decision to devalue the yuan upon Vietnamese trade with China. Okay, so let's just find a form, let's just complete the first factor. First factor basically है ये कि Marshall-Lerner condition depends on basically the elasticity of Chinese products. Say if China meets the Marshall-Lerner condition, it will enjoy. So let's say if China meets the Marshall boy, it will enjoy. Damn it! Yeah, it will enjoy surplus, while Vietnam, which is actually the question, suffers a BOT deficit. So yeah, that's the first factor, and you just don't have to do any of the bakwas I did. This is actually going to be a very short answer. Basically, all that I'm writing in blue and blue and brown. The second factor might be other conditions. So I take parallel. I don't know how to spell parallel. My bad. Parallel devaluation, because that's what something that was given in the case study as well. So yeah, what I mean by parallel devaluation is that China ने तो devalue किया. To what extent has Vietnam simultaneously or parallelly devalued its own currency? Right. So understand, if China's currency, well, like if China's try to increase its supply of its yuan and hence push down its exchange rate relative to the Vietnamese जो भी currency Vietnam की, but Vietnam tried to do the same. That depending on kiska attempt was more substantial, that would depend on it. If Vietnam managed to devalue its currency more than China did, so the overall exchange rate of China and Vietnam के बीच में बनेगा. शायद Chinese, if Chinese devaluation is met by a larger degree of devaluation by Vietnam, um, then overall China's currency might have even appreciated relative to Vietnam. Like so basically, if you take the Chinese currency, let's say this is China, this is Vietnam. China ने इतनी कम currency कम करने की कोशिश की, Vietnam ने इतनी कर दी. So your overall exchange rate क्या होगा? Exchange rate यही from China's perspective would actually increase. Does this make sense to you guys? Hello. Anyone confused with this particular, with the idea of parallel devaluation? Okay, so I assume no news is good news. So yeah, and you basically say what I said in, you just put it into words. Okay, you know, depends on the extent of Vietnamese devaluation. Again, I could be wrong. That's why I keep checking the marking scheme to be on the safe side. But these are the two factors I think you can talk about, and it's a very short answer. I just tried to explain a few concepts along the way. Anya Hassan raised hand. Yes, Anya.
So you want, when answering this question, you want us to A, talk about China meeting the Marshall Lerner condition, and then B, the parallel devaluation, and we just give 2 marks to explain each.
Yeah, you get 2 marks for the Marshall Lerner condition and 2 marks for parallel devaluation. Just clarify how that would affect Vietnam's trade with China, right? Like basically what we did here. Yeah. Either the final link जो था वो definitely make करना है. So like basically what इसमें marking scheme क्या बोले? Probably it's like 1 mark for identifying a factor, 1 mark for the development, for the explanation of it. Hence you get 2 marks per factor. But let's still check the marking scheme. Let's see. Yeah, basically, so for identification of relevant factor, 1 mark. For explanation of this factor, 1 mark. And so factors include the price elasticity of demand for China's, let me add, for China's exports to and imports from Vietnam, i.e. whether the Marshall Lerner condition, this is basically what we said. So yeah, we're good. Is satisfied. And in fact, they would even credit whether or not you just took time period. Like, because understand, normally in the short run, things could be inelastic and might not meet the Marshall Lerner condition. But it isn't necessary, right? So you could still make these into 2 different factors. कि हाँ, Marshall Lerner condition है, but long run and short run की भी बात कर सकते हैं. Okay, so you, and they have the PES of Chinese exports, which is basically saying the link here with PES is like, chalo, let's say China ने अपनी currency devalue कर दी, prices उसकी कम हो गई, उसकी export prices कम हो गई, there now more units of exports is being, the quantity demanded for exports has increased. Can China match that with its supply? Depends on the price elasticity of supply of its exports. This is what we took, whether the devaluation of the dong, which is the Vietnamese currency, offsets the devaluation of the yuan. You could also talk about protectionist things and relative inflation rates, because obviously अगर inflation rate China में बहुत ज़्यादा चल रहा है, Vietnam में बहुत कम चल रहा है. So even though devaluation would decrease export prices for China, inflation might offset that. Are we good with this question? We spent a lot of time on it, but hopefully it's clear by now. I'll assume you guys are good with it then.
Yeah,
Yes,
Ashton,
yes,
बात सुनना.
हाँ बोलो.
यार instead of doing all these questions, हम एक बार ना पूरा structure बता दो आंसर करने का 4 mark का और 6 mark का.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, 4 and 6 का it's a structure नहीं होता. Like the way I structured the 8 and 12 marks, वो उसमें you can define a structure. Yeah, whoever that is, I don't need to see your face. So with this stuff, it really depends on what keywords they've used. So like here they had explain, right? So you just basically write a factor, few lines explaining it, write the other factor, few lines explaining it.
नहीं, by explain do they mean पूरा paragraph लिखना है या बस 2 lines लिख दूं?
A few lines, as long as you get the content across. So it could I just be a very very short answer. But here, like the reason I can't like generalize this is because look here. So like part C में either explain है, so this would be a different answer. Part D में discuss है, so this would be a different answer. So case study में I can't really generalize stuff like that. In section B I can, and I've uploaded a video about that as well. YouTube channel पे अगर check करनी है.
और 6 mark में diagram आएगा या नहीं?
Yeah, it depends on the question. I would say the diagram घुसा सकते हो, घुसा देना. Like if I was doing the paper and this is part.
यार हमजा भाई चुप हो जाओ 2 मिनट.
Okay.
पढ़ ले ले भाई.
It's okay. It's okay. Say. So if I was doing the question and let's say part B में J curve हम बना सकते थे, बनाने की जरूरत नहीं थी. But what I do, I just leave a little space. I do the entire paper and like because मुझे time का ज़रा डर होता है ना. And if I'm बाद में मैं फायक बैठा होता हूँ तो मैं बस जाकर diagram बना देता हूँ. I'm like, they won't cut marks for diagrams, right? Like it'll only add to your answer maturity. But definitely जिधर बना सकते हो diagrams बना दिया करो. कंजूसी नहीं करो. If you're confused, just draw it. Because I'm using the free version of this software, I can't have a very long meeting time. So what I'm going to do, because we only have 2 minutes left, I'll end the meeting abhi and we'll start again in 5 seconds. So I just want you all to just join again with the same invite, with the same ID basically. So I'm ending the meeting, but just join again. I'll wait till a minute or so for you guys to join with the same ID, but just do the same thing again.